It's BWI Daily Edition coming up on the show today. I don't know. I didn't plan the show. You did. It is the mailbag episode back for the bye week. Myself, Nate Bauer, answering your questions this Thursday on the BWI Daily Edition. Let's get to it. Back by popular demand, I might add. It's the BWI Daily Edition. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. That's Nate Bauer. We're answering your Penn State football questions. 5 weeks into the season, we've done a lot of reflection. We've done a lot of comparison over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And today, we're just talking about what you want to talk about the first 5 weeks of the season. Nate, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm always so impressed by your intros. They're so well thought out. They're so snappy. I can't do that. I do it with Fitz, and it's terrible. So
I will say,
give me some pointers.
So air checking on air, your pace is phenomenal. You know, I talk 1,000 miles a minute. You've got great pace. So there's the clay we're working with, phenomenal.
Hey, I'm trying to get 1% better every day. So,
oh, by the way, we are now past 365 episodes, so we are 1% better every single day for a full year now. Congratulations to the quasi-official birthday of the BWI Daily Edition, but also we're in the bye week. Yep. And I normally will talk to you when we're live here on YouTube, and we'll discuss what you want to during the show. Mm-hmm. I don't always like to point this out, but this is not a live broadcast. We are airing it live on YouTube. So if you're in the comment section, you want to ask questions, today's questions are coming where they did previously from social media and from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So it's a great reminder that if you are not yet, be a member of BlueWhiteIllustrated.com so that when we do the mailbag, the official mailbag where we're taking questions for the show, those primarily come from those avenues. So sign up for $1, 12 months of access. It's in the description, all that great stuff. We're getting those questions today. Wanted to set the record straight for everybody who's watching so that people don't feel left out. And if you're watching the video, give it a like, even though I'm probably disappointing you here. Are you ready to get to the questions?
And subscribe and set notifications. Thank you. Moving on.
I even get notifications on my phone. I'm like, ooh, we're live. And I go and I try to be in the chat as much as possible when we aren't live to, provide the same sense of community. And I enjoy it, by the way. It's a ton of fun. Chester Copperpot comes with a great question today.
All right.
Do you think there are wrinkles or plays that PSU has up its sleeve for these 3 games? Will PSU open up their playbook, offense and defense, and give more opportunities for the first-year players? I do think that there's more in store, especially offensively, for the next 3 weeks. What do you think?
Yeah, I hate the word wrinkles, but yes, yeah. I'll play this game. There's a few things going on, right? One, Northwestern showed virtually nothing by matter of circumstance. And so now you're talking about really, absent Central Michigan, which there wasn't a whole lot to do. Penn State started with the ball inside the 20 like 3 times.
Yeah.
Right. So the offense didn't do a whole lot in that game. You're going back to really the Auburn game since Penn State's offense has done anything different or new or spectacular, under a normal condition, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I absolutely expect some different level of performance, certainly, but also, just different things that they want to do. I mean, it's just the debate and the conversation is always like, oh, is it people want to know if Penn State has saved things for this, as though there's going to be this radical new identity. I don't think that. I think it's that there are base concepts that they've had throughout that they pick and choose based on what they're going to see.
Absolutely.
What are the looks that they're going to see defensively from these 3 teams that Penn State has coming up? That will dictate what you're going to see. But are there like trick plays? Are there things that are probably in their pockets that they haven't gotten out yet that they've probably worked quite a bit on? I would guess that that's absolutely the case.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at that too. That the idea, I'm just going to end up repeating what you said, but the idea of saving things, is not necessarily something that happens where, and I'll attack it this way. So give you a specific example. The counter pitch where they pitch the ball, but it's a counter play. That is a wrinkle, right? But that becomes a part of your playbook now. So it's not like you're designing trick plays for each week. Now, they did debut a trick run versus Northwestern, and it went for a fumble. So they have been deploying some of these tricks, but the point is, and I guess this is where I'm considering the passing game more so than the running game when it comes to augmentations or things we haven't seen a lot of. They have not used that part of the offense extensively since Ohio.
Yep.
I mean, Purdue, they had to win the game that way, but really Ohio, they had an efficient passing attack where I saw some good concepts that they then used later. And that's the best way to use a concept is it's new, it's a play, it's not a trick. And then you can use it later and you can augment it. You can play off of those things. So I think Mike Yurcich has always done a great job of taking a base concept and turning it on its head. The point is this year, the base concepts are working better than they have in the past.
Yep.
Except for the passing game, which we'll get to in a little bit. What about the defense? I don't want to limit Manny Diaz because he has come up with some insane stuff. It's also harder to see, I think, on defense in terms of a defensive play call where none of us really can see the stunts and the twists and all the crazy stuff he's doing from the broadcast angle because it's, you're trapped in that two-dimensional frame. Do you think more there as well?
I'll be curious to see, because this is really going to be the first time for us to see it, and I mean, obviously no disrespect to Auburn, but I think that Penn State understood that it didn't have to do a ton to limit that Auburn offense, that Auburn's offense limited itself. And so my question is, in bigger games, in more highly equipped offenses that Penn State is going to face, does Manny Diaz do more tricks up his sleeve or fewer? Right? What's the approach when you're facing an offense that's as dynamic as certainly Ohio State is, but also Michigan appears to be, and certainly Minnesota has its own strengths offensively that are a little bit different from the rest of the West.
And so we were updating our predictions for a roundtable this week, and I hope I'm not spoiling anything. I hope the article is out. I didn't ask Greg when he was putting it out, but the point being, a team that I looked ahead to the schedule on is in this particular conversation. What you just said, you got to be aware of what Maryland is this year. Talia Tagovailoa played well last year, and I know that the interceptions and the box score stats did not indicate that. He is playing very well. They're 4-1. I know that they lost to Michigan, but they were in that game late, and I just think that you can't take that team lightly. Anytime you have a good quarterback, and Tagovailoa has been a good quarterback, whether or not you want to acknowledge that is a secondary point. He's been a good quarterback. He's been dangerous. They have to prove that they are good enough to go up against good quarterbacks, and they're going to face a couple in the second half of the season. Quickly, before we get to the next question, what is your impression of this start versus last season? I went deep in the numbers the last 2 days to look at comparison of 21 and 22, so it's on my mind. But just generally, your assessment of where they are this year as opposed to last year's 5-0 start.
Yeah, I think they are living less close to the edge in terms of depth. I think that the depth development has been a huge factor, one, in the storyline of the first 5 games, but also what it means to the second 7 games, 8 games, depending on injuries. Because look, injuries happen. You just saw it to Keandre Lambert-Smith. It's going to happen. It's just Keandre Lambert-Smith's injury, and obviously knock on wood for his sake that it's not that serious. But if it is, and to happen at that position is just dramatically different from PJ Mustipher and Sean Clifford. But
right.
Also, like, obviously those didn't happen in the first 5 games last year. What stands out to me is defensively, they're much more ball hawking. They just are. They catch the interceptions, and it wasn't like they didn't have opportunities last year. They just didn't catch some of them. they're catching them this year after being blanked in the first 2 games. The past 3, they've gotten a ton of interceptions, fumble recoveries, you name it. And then offensively, I sound like a broken record, but I think Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen changed things because, and concurrent to some improvement in run blocking on the offensive line, that those 3 things combined give Penn State a versatility that just did not exist last season on offense, and a home run threat that also didn't exist really anywhere outside of Jahan Dotson.
Yeah. And so going into the article I did today, that was one area that I guess I was more surprised in than anything was the run blocking improvement, which I have seen, like that tangibly I can say I've seen better performances, did not come through in the wash when you look at PFF grades or some of the metrics that you can measure by when it comes to the offensive line, because there are very few. So that was a surprise to me. But the overall, I think the point about last year too is so far underscored by, even if you accept a PFF grade for what it is along the offensive line, and it just shows having a good running back that can break tackles. That's what they needed last year. They were missing that element, and it was really as simple as that.
What's bottom line, what's yards per carry this year against yards per carry last year? Because I would guess among the running backs, if I'm ballparking off the top of my head, I think it was 3.1 last year with sack adjusted just from the running backs was 3.1.
I didn't look at the individual. I was doing through the first 5 games, but I didn't look at the team through the first 5 games this week. I only looked at the individual stats. But last season, Noah Cain averaged 3.2 yards per carry, Kevon Lee 6.2. But when you take all of that in consideration, it was not that good through the first 5 games.
They're at 4.9 yards per carry right now as a team.
Yep.
It's just noticeable.
Let's get to our next question. Chest Westerson, what do you think is the what do you think is the effective starter at running back? It should be who? Singleton to let him find his groove and hit explosive runs, or start Allen to have more consistent running game and then bring Singleton as a change of pace back? There has been a growing fan base with Kaytron Allen, despite the fame, despite the excitement of Nick Singleton. I have a feeling you don't really look at the question this way, do you?
I don't know. I think that people tend to want what they don't have, and so Kaytron Allen, I think, is very good. I don't think that speaking highly of Nick Singleton in any way diminishes what Kaytron Allen brings to the field. I think that what Nick Singleton provides is an element that, while it's not necessarily predictable, it's an element that Penn State needs considerably more than it does the 5 yards of carry that Kaytron Allen's going to give you. And those are great. That's a great thing to have in your pocket. I'm not sure that there's a wrong answer there, but I just think that the impact of Nick Singleton, in particular early in games, if possible, it changes what defenses do.
Yep.
It alters the approach. And so if you can establish that from the get-go or somewhere around the get-go, it upends things. It makes defensive coordinators nervous. It changes how they approach the game.
There's a psyche to it, right?
So you can get
burned by a pass play, and the defense coordinator can get mad because somebody busted a coverage, right? So like typically the way I've observed defense is that giving up a long run play is an affront. It is an offense to football. Giving up a deep passing play is an individual that made a mistake that you can go yell at. Yep. There's a huge difference there.
Yep. No, it's so yes, I do think that if I don't even like putting myself in those shoes because I know that I'm not qualified for it. But from my uneducated opinion or perspective, it's yes, that Nick Singleton does provide something that Kaytron Allen does not.
Yeah.
And that element, again, as unpredictable as it might be, is of a superior value.
Yeah.
When you look at the whole of the game.
Let's also not get caught up in the moment. because this is a very easy thing to do. It's something I was going to ask James Franklin about. Like, do coaches get caught up in the moment of the last 2 games have gone this way? So then you start to think things go this way, even though, like, when you look at the whole thing and what you've been able to do over the course of time tells a very different story. Last week in the first half, Nick Singleton was ripping off 10 and 15-yard runs.
Yep.
He was being productive, and then he fumbled, and then he came out of the game. The week before, he was struggling a little bit, but Kaytron Allen was producing similar results to Nick Singleton against Northwestern. The difference being that he came in the second half and didn't fumble until the very end of the game instead of at the beginning. So, like, let's not get caught up in the idea that Nick Singleton is one thing and Kaytron Allen is another, because he was proving in that game he was on to a very healthy 5 yards a carry without a 70-yard touchdown. He was being consistent, and then he fumbled.
This is not fair to Kaytron Allen, but I'm going to say it anyway. It stopped raining in the second half. The ball wasn't as wet. It wasn't, the conditions were not as bad in the second half as they were in the first half. And so if you had the same amount of carry, like, it's a revisionist history. You're not comparing necessarily apples to apples in this case. And I just, look, it is what it is. But I think that either way, you probably can't lose. Yeah. It's just that's what I perceive Penn State to value in Singleton and why he's been getting those first cracks.
Yeah, and so the consistency is the other thing. That is the feeling, and I think that's what it is. What Chess says here: more consistent run game, and then bring in Singleton. How quickly can Nicholas close that gap? Right, of being consistent and trusting his eyes and trusting all the things that Kaytron is very good at. How soon could he close that gap? And I was seeing a good bit of that throughout the first, even when he was making some mistakes against Central Michigan in terms of being pressing a little too hard, he would come back and make up for it the next play with a good read.
Yeah.
But, Kaytron, that's what he's providing you, is consistent on every down, making generally good decisions. It's not like Nick is not. So again, that's we have to have the nuance of the conversation. And I think that, with his talent and his abilities and his maturity, he's earned that position, but they're both going to play. The point is both of them are going to play.
Totally. If Kevon Lee comes into the conversation, then we can start to debate. We can have a hotter debate, but I don't think that, look, Singleton is leading in rushing yards on just a few more carries. His yards per carry is higher, obviously, because he has more home runs. Yeah. So, they're both winners. Good for Penn State.
Before we get to our next question, we're going to go through the next ones pretty quickly because we set a goal and we are far from accomplishing it.
Way out of whack here.
Have you been looking for a reliable source of Penn State football tickets? Do you want to get to a home game where it is 60 degrees and raining through the remnants of a hurricane? If that is a good time to you, and let me tell you, Zoe was at the game on Saturday, and I love her. She stayed the entire time. She forced the people with her to stay the entire time. She watched the entire game. She loves football. If that's like you're a diehard that's going to go no matter what. Jim at TixmanJim.com, formerly PSU Tixman Jim, has been running his ticket exchange in Wilmington, Delaware for over 25 years. Check out his website. Every buyer is handled with courtesy, respect, and every ticket purchased is guaranteed. Proceeds are used to fund the PSU AA Chapter Scholarship Fund and the PSU Levi Lamb Fund for athletic scholarships. Get your tickets to the Ohio State Stripe Out Homecoming, the only games anyone's talked to me about or cared about in the last month, once they knew that Penn State was going to win those games that they were playing. Homecoming and the whiteout, the stripe out, all of it still on the table. www.tixmanjim.com or email Jim at tixmanjim@gmail.com. Call 302-521-8380. So that's www.tixmanjim.com. All right. Next question. Cousin Eddie. How are the middle linebackers grading out through 5 games? I haven't been impressed with either of them thus far. Just curious how they're performing. I did dive into those numbers, and Cousin Eddie, the numbers say that they are not playing very well, and your eye test is correct. There are things beyond just that, though. So, Nate, do you think that they are providing the functional need for the defense to be successful?
I guess bluntly, I haven't formed an opinion this year, and maybe my eye just hasn't been discerning enough. But I said it on Monday. They have not been the splash play makers. I follow the ball more often than not, and these guys aren't around it more often than not. So, I trust your analysis and your eye on this one way more than I trust myself, because here we are 3 days later, and I definitely haven't changed my opinion from not having an opinion about those two guys.
I wouldn't say they've been exposed, really. And
fine.
I know,
fine.
Yeah.
Been fine.
In the underneath passing game, Penn State fans are accurate to point out that the middle linebacker has not been performing to his duties, including, by the way, Kobe King, who everyone is chomping at the bit to supplant Tyler Elsdon as the starter because they perceive this upside that is there. And maybe athletically there is more to give, but I've come out and said it last week, like the percentage increase is not as high as you'd think.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, they're both performing adequately, and Kobe King is probably like a higher ceiling player that is still learning. And they haven't been exposed to the extent of they've been giving up touchdowns, but I think that's the whole point, is that they're never going to be in that position. So scheming around a little bit, maybe using them as the first one into the breach, maybe you could say, in the run game, so that other guys can go make plays. There's a lot of that in football too, of like one guy sacrifices so that another guy gets open for a catch or for a tackle or things like that. So if that's what you're doing, being in your gap is the important thing. And for the most part, they've been there. Tyler Elsdon, his arm length and his tackling, that is something that concerns me, because he has missed enough tackles that part, I think, is a real problem. Yeah. Chester comes back with another one. Double dips. Normally I don't allow this, but it's the bye week.
Oh, and he's Chester Copperpot. You can't deny that. He's the best.
I agree. Certain people do get favorable treatment. I admit it. Other than Clift, what player or players need to make a biggest improvement for PSU to win 2 of the next 3 games? We'll start there, and then I'll ask the second question that he has in this.
How many players do I get to pick?
He says, or players. So let's give 2 each if you want.
Okay, I'm gonna say Trey Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to happen. So him, and then no opinion on a specific player, but I just think that any ongoing improvement of the offensive line will be essential. So I'll let you take that side of things, T-Frank, but I would just say whoever is the weak link on the offensive line, Caden Wallace was the easy target over the first couple of weeks. Yeah. But whoever that guy is, whoever those guys are, if they take a bigger step, I just think that it dictates and impacts, especially from the Sean Clifford end of things. Yeah. It impacts him so much. It is such a huge swing between what his performance looked like when he's under pressure versus when he's not. That if you can solidify that group and heck, add the tight ends, add the running backs, whatever the pass protection methodology is, if those improve, I think Penn State will see demonstrable improvement out of Sean Clifford.
One quick note, I think the running backs are a little bit worse this year. You got 2 freshmen that are pass protecting, and they have been worse than they were last year, but they have far offset that. That's kind of my thing when we talked about this preseason of like, can they learn X, Y, and Z? And kind of boils down to if you're providing more than your problems create, and if you're Kaytron Allen or Nick Singleton and you're not elite pass blockers yet, I don't care. You've got 499 yards rushing. That's better. Like that's more impactful than allowing 3 pressures in a couple of games. But to put a fine point on what you talk about the offensive line, if you want to check out the full breakdown, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, sign up for $1, get 12 months of access. That is not going to last forever. For real, though, this time. And I got into those numbers. without giving all of it away, the interior offensive linemen outside of Juice Scruggs. That is where the improvement needs to come as pass protectors, especially in what you just talked about. Both guards have not performed well, especially in obvious passing situations. And I think from Sal Wormley's perspective, a little bit of it is just pass blocking awareness. So that can change and improve. Landon Tangwell seems to have some bigger problems in terms of core strength and stability and things I didn't expect that would be problems this year for him. I thought he was a very mature athlete coming in. A lot of that, we're reworking our assessment of those things, but I still believe in the upside of what he has. But those two guys, Hunter Norzad, whenever he gets back healthy, Sean Clifford does not do well with pressure in his face. And he's affected by it more than other quarterbacks, it seems. So part of the numbers I found was that pressure is coming from different areas this year, and it is affecting him beyond just passing plays where there's pressure. He's becoming more susceptible to phantoms in the pocket this year, and I believe part of it is because it's coming from right in his face instead of the tackles. So if they could clean that up, they would have an elite pass blocking unit, but ifs and buts and who knows? They'll be, again, facing better competition. So that'd be that part. Defensively, the linebackers, you could point to them as well, but we're going to save some of the other people in this conversation for later because the questions are going to come up specifically. Who's the biggest surprise, positive or negative, in the first half of the season?
Brenton Strange.
Yep. I'd go Abdul Carter as far as
I'm sorry,
in a positive sense.
Yeah, I had the right answer. So
well, I have to give a different answer, but you know,
that's fair.
You're right. It's more. There is one right answer. So John, spelled Jawn for us on the podcast, which makes me think he's from Philly. That's a Philly thing, John, right?
It is.
Okay.
Still don't know what it means, but yeah.
I don't either. I've been nowhere and lived nowhere in my life, so I don't have that cultural background. But anyway, do you think Caden Wallace has turned a corner, or is he somewhat of a liability at tackle? I haven't noticed him as much as I did during the first few games, and as a casual fan, it usually is a good thing for the O-line. Wondering if there's anything, or if I'm too dumb to see or notice. No, you're correct, John. He has been better, partially because the offense is catering more to his abilities. And I don't want to say they're catering to him specifically, but in these gap schemes they've been running, the power and the counter, when he's combo blocking with Salim Wormley, that is an actual difference maker. He's been in better situations as a run blocker, but no, he has not turned the corner as a pass protector. It is the exact same, and that is a real problem. And Bryce Effner is not good either at this point as pass protector. So
hey.
The statistical output has been they have allowed a lot of pressure from the right tackle. It has equated to the same number as last season, so it is not worse.
Yeah,
but he has not become demonstrably better as a pass protector. They just have been throwing the ball less.
Hide your weaknesses, accentuate your strengths.
Yep. And that first
cliche.
Game, that first game against Purdue, they could not hide that, and they have been able to since. Navy Blue, what do you think of the wide receiver run blocking downfield? Started to look for it during the Northwestern game, rewatch, and thought you maybe, with a better effort, could make that 9-yard run go for 30. Is this something you've noticed, Nate? Is it something you have a comment on?
No, not really. I thought that Keandre Lambert-Smith had some notable moments, right? Some of the blocks that sprung Nick Singleton sprung were of his doing. Brenton Strange has been a big part of some of those, but yeah, outside of that, no comment.
I think if there's one player I would point to, it might be Mitchell Tinsley could improve as a blocker. I've noticed a couple times what I think Navy Blue is talking about, where there's an alley, there's a gap, and if Tinsley gets his guy, then you're one-on-one with a safety. And, but then you're corralled by two players, and it's not the same effect as if you're one-on-one with a safety. I will say in the Northwestern game, once again, they got Allen and Singleton and Lee. They got them to the safety. They did not break that tackle for an explosive run, which is another part of that game and how the game script played into a 17-7 win over Northwestern, is the weather and that's also why they kept doing it. Is like, well, we're going to get him one-on-one with a safety or a corner. We're going to keep doing that and take our chances.
Yeah.
NLE 24 says this season, Yurcich seems to be drawing more from RPO to wishbone to old-fashioned smash mouth. Where did those come from? Has he always had these plays, or has he reimagined an offensive strategy? Or I guess you could say he's using the guys that he's very effectively, but I wonder where the offensive playbook developed from. Nate, we've had this conversation for a while.
Yeah,
right?
this is your wheelhouse because you talked about it all last year. They tried everything last year. So none of this is really new. I don't think. Maybe I don't know. You can speak to it better than I can, but a lot of the looks formationally that they've had have been, that three backfield quarterback flanked by right on either side. It has been, they've had that for a couple of years now.
Two tight end sets. So the one area that James Franklin has talked about is going under center has been one of the biggest changes. I think there has been more offensive creativity from the playbook, but that is because it's opened up by having a threat in the run game. So if everyone's tuned up to run to the sideline to outflank Nick Singleton, you have more cutback opportunities. You can do more with one run when you have personnel that you have to take seriously. And, from a speed perspective. The flip side is this goes back to something James Franklin said before the season, talking about identities and systems. And I believe in these plays. I'm going to run these plays. This is my system. And James Franklin talked about if you've got two tight ends that are the strength of your team, or you can go three tight end sets, you've got to be able to incorporate those things into your system, or else you're doing a disservice to the players. So I do think there is some of this that's fitting the players into the system, but I do think that there has been a radical change in Mike Yurcich and what he's done from what I've seen previously. I definitely think what he's doing at Penn State is different than what he's done previously. And I don't know if that's the James Franklin component of these things, his influence and suggestions and things he wants from his offensive coordinator, or if it's something I asked James Franklin about, is that our team's figuring out the spread and you have to evolve or else you're running empty plays. And I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah. Agreed.
PSU ATL 99. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to read all of this. So I'll skip to the end here and says, I'll trust this coaching staff is putting the best players on the field to give Penn State a chance to win. But what can Penn State do to open things up downfield with the current group of players? Are the schematic changes that can be made, or is it purely a matter of better execution? Thanks. And I'll admit I pre-read this. He's talking about biggest shortcoming, lack of downfield passing game. It is absolutely true. 12% of the downfield passing, 3 completed passes. It's a problem. We've talked about it a lot from the third receiver, but it can't just be the third receiver, is it, Nate? It can't just be the difference of one player on the offense.
No, the quarterback and the offensive line. But I don't think I think what you have in Tinsley and Washington, and I don't think that those guys are going to change from being more or less possession receivers. And there's a place for that. They're not burners. They're just not. They're not fast, comparatively speaking. And so I don't know how much of it is Sean Clifford just not having great ability throwing the ball downfield. How much of it is the connection side of things, right? I mean, yes, Keandre Lambert-Smith was supposed to be that, but there were concerns about Keandre Lambert-Smith before the season started. Right. And so if it's not Keandre Lambert-Smith and it's Trey Wallace, or if it's Omari Evans, there's been less time there. There has been not as much, not as much of a history, I guess, for those two to have worked with Clifford on that specific element. But like schematically, that's for you as to are they open? It seems to me as though there have been some, but not with any level of consistency.
This is the hard thing, is then you've got to go back in and remember all the deep passing plays and all the plays that aren't thrown. Right. So this is the other part of it too, is like there are plays that maybe could have been deep passes that the quarterback didn't select that particular route, whether or not it's a choice or if that's the read, whatever it is. Like, there's always, football has it just goes everywhere. There's consequences and actions all over the place. I can't remember the diagram that I'm trying to think of, where like a flow chart. Like, it's a crazy complex flow chart.
Sure.
Generally, if we're talking about the receiver specifically, I think a lack of separation bears out in the contested catch numbers this year, and it bears out in the lack of explosive plays, given what we know about Sean Clifford and his desire to throw to open receivers. I also think Jahan Dotson's lack of presence and coverage rolling to him, as it did throughout the season, it left Keandre Lambert-Smith some pretty good opportunities, right? It left some pretty good stuff underneath for Parker Washington. Parker Washington is still getting that stuff underneath. It's just that there's not a consistent deep threat from skill perspective to then augment and uncondense the field, unbox the underneath coverage.
Yeah.
But they also haven't been throwing it as much this year, and they haven't needed explosive plays that way because they can get them through the run game. So it's a complicated answer. Magically, if the quarterback could be better, you could solve this problem. But that's not the thing.
Look at the passing chart to date, right? Who has, and do this blind, T-Frank, who has the longest pass catch on the season through 5 games?
I cheated. That it's Brenton Strange, and
it is
actually it's the same. It's 67 yards, which was the longest last season as well. At this point, there's some spooky comparisons between these 2 years. So 67 yards.
But that's a 67-yard reception that was really a 20-yard pass or a 25-yard pass. It was
on a scramble.
Correct. And so and even Parker Washington, his longest 43, that was a catch and run. So after that, there's been lots of catch and run, I think. And certainly some of it is limited by the amount of field that you have left to work with before the end zone, because Khalil Dinkins could have gone for more than 28 yards had he not plunged his way into the end zone. Keandre Lambert-Smith, the same, 29 yards. Like all of those passes, there has not been any type of prevalence of chucking it down the field, for lack of a better way to describe it to me.
And they really haven't had to. Again, going back to that point, is they could have in this last game, and they didn't have to. The Central Michigan game is the game that I think is concerning, is that you weren't able to get it done there, but that was also the first iteration of the game plan specific to Penn State this year. So have they had enough time to adjust and adapt to that? I apologize to Sykim. I was going to get to both of these questions together, but they are the same, and we are running out of time. Yoga Ninja 13 says, love the mailbag. What do you do about number 25, who was above average last year at nickel, meaning Daquan Hardy? This year, not so much. He comes on the field, and you can actually see opposing offensive coordinators drooling. What options? We have options here. How about 5, 6, 8, 21, meaning the other players? Dixon or King can't play nickel. Need a change here. Thanks. Daquan Hardy's struggles this year probably are the most mystifying thing to me of all the things. Tyler Warren's regression as a run blocker and Daquan Hardy, his regression as a cover corner. What do you think the solution is? Because James Franklin and the staff have always given guys time to play themselves out of poor play. Is time running out for that, or is this going to be something he continues to work on?
I don't know. I don't think it's. I don't know. I mean, maybe the plays that stand out that have been made against him, I don't think have been unilaterally his fault. Right? Like plays that he hasn't made. I think some of them have been good plays. The Auburn reception is one that stands out to me, of just a great catch, right? And so I don't necessarily see it as this glaring weakness. I'm not going to sit here and argue that he has had a great first half of the season, but certainly the skill set that they think that he brings to the field, I understand why it remains appealing to Penn State's coaching staff to keep him on the field. I'll be interested to see how it goes for him.
If it were the reality that he, that Yoga Ninja is purporting here, what are the solutions? Do you have a roadmap of the solutions? Because they do play Johnny Dixon at slot corner already at nickel, but then you're losing a little bit of the flexibility of the defense where Dixon has been a good blitzer. And are you going to blitz him less because he's playing nickel more? I think all of these things have a consequential effect on one another. And I don't know that you can bench Daquan Hardy, and I don't know that you should, but I do agree that he is consistently the weak link in the secondary that teams are attacking. That is based on everything I've seen, and the numbers all bear that out, that he is the guy that they're targeting in these third down situations.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know what they would do. I just think that you're right in the sense of there would be a reaction to that. You're going to lose something else by making that type of a move. Yeah,
and I think the main thing here is don't give up on players with talent, and don't give up on players that you've seen produce in the past. I think that's a good place to end that particular conversation. And Daquan Hardy, it seems like a guy that has worked hard to be where he is and has deserved and earned the opportunity to play himself out of it, I think.
I mean, I'm just stunned that the questions 5 games in are not about John Sutherland for the exact same thing, right? Because that was the mystery coming into the season, and now, someone else has been found as an easy target for the ills that have happened. But let's keep things in perspective here. This is a Penn State defense that's giving up 13.2 points per game through 5 games.
Yep.
Like they've been really good. They've been very, very good. There are weaknesses that will exist and that will get worse for Penn State as the season goes on. But by and large, you're going to take what they have done so far, including, again, I keep hammering it home, but not getting burnt on chunk plays. 4 touchdowns. They've given up chunk plays and they've given up long third downs, but they haven't gotten burnt into the end zone, and that matters.
Nate Bauer, senior editor of Blue White Illustrated. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. That'll do it for our mailbag episode. Thank you very much, Nate.
Thanks so much for having me. That's a quick ending, but I like it.
Yeah, well, I kept you longer than I promised, so I want to at least make the exit a little bit nicer. We'll be back tomorrow on the BWI Daily Edition. Talk to you then.